A man stands up to teach. He opens his Bible, he looks out at the room, and he says the line everyone in that room already believes. Remember, God helps those who help themselves. He's quoting a verse that does not exist, not in the King James, not in any translation, not in Hebrew, not in Greek, not anywhere. And almost nobody in that room will ever know. So here's the question that started this whole investigation for me. If God never said it, who did? Who put those 8 words in the Bible's mouth and got away with it for centuries? The trail is longer than you'd guess. It runs back 2,500 years, and it ends somewhere that should stop you cold, a place that has nothing to do with the God of the Bible at all. Because here's the part nobody tells you. The real scripture, the 4 words the Apostle Paul actually wrote, doesn't just disagree with this saying. It says the exact opposite. And it turns on one Greek word most English Bibles quietly soften. Asthenēs. Stay with me. By the end, you'll never hear this verse the same way again. Let me show you how deep this goes first, because it's not a few people getting it wrong. When researchers have surveyed Americans about what's actually in the Bible, this line comes up again and again as the verse people are most sure is in there. Pollsters have found that a striking majority, by some counts around 8 in 10, believe God helps those who help themselves is scripture. And it's not just folks outside the church. Plenty of lifelong church-going, Bible-believing people will tell you it's in there. Some could even point you to roughly where, Proverbs, maybe, or somewhere near the back. I'll be honest with you. For years, I was one of them. I'd say it. I'd nod along when someone else said it. It sounded right. It sounded like good, sturdy, grown-up faith. None of that waiting around for a miracle business. Roll up your sleeves. God meets effort with effort. I never once checked. Why would you check a verse you've heard your whole life? Then one day I went looking for it. I wanted the reference, the chapter and verse, so I could quote it properly. And it wasn't there. I looked again. I looked in 3 translations. I searched every word. Nothing. The most quoted verse in America, and the Bible has never heard of it. And before you decide this is just trivia, a fun fact for the next time someone quotes it, let me tell you why it actually matters. Because a saying like this doesn't just sit there. It shapes how you pray. If you believe deep down that God helps those who help themselves, then on the worst day of your life, the day you can't help yourself, the day you're flat on your back and have nothing left to offer, you will quietly assume God is waiting for you to get it together first. You'll think you have to earn your way back into his attention. And that is the precise moment this little proverb does its real damage. It tells the weakest person in the room that help is for people who don't need it. That's when the real question hit me, and it's the one I want to take you through today. A sentence this famous doesn't come from nowhere. Somebody wrote it. Somebody first put these words together, and then somebody else decided they belonged to God. So we're going to do something simple and a little uncomfortable. We're going to follow the sentence backwards, step by step, century by century, until we find the person who started it. The first step back lands us in a print shop in Philadelphia. Benjamin Franklin, not a preacher, not a theologian, a printer, an inventor, a man with a genius for the short, sticky phrase. Every year, Franklin put out a little book called Poor Richard's Almanac, weather, calendars, and packed in the margins, the proverbs that would shape how an entire young country talked about success. And there it is, printed in Franklin's almanac. God helps them that help themselves. He gathered his best lines into one famous address about getting ahead in life, and this one sat right in the middle of it, shoulder to shoulder with early to bed, early to rise, and there are no gains without pains. Do you see what just happened? The line didn't enter American life through a pulpit. It came in through a business book, a guide to working hard and getting rich. It was advice about money and industry, and it was so good, so quotable, that it slowly drifted upward, out of the almanac and into the air, until people stopped hearing it as Franklin's advice and started hearing it as God's command. This is how it became, for millions of people, the unofficial American gospel. Pull yourself up. God blesses the hustle. Heaven rewards the grind. It's a beautiful, motivating idea. It built a country. And here's the trap. When something matches our values that perfectly, we stop asking where it came from. It feels biblical because it feels like us. And think about how a sentence like that travels. It doesn't travel because someone checks it. It travels because it's useful. A father says it to a son who won't get off the couch. A teacher says it to a struggling class. A pastor reaches for it on a Sunday when he wants people to take responsibility, and reaching for it feels safe because surely it's in there somewhere. Every repetition sands off another fingerprint. Nobody is lying. Everybody is just passing along a coin they were handed, assuming someone, somewhere, back at the beginning, minted it as scripture. That assumption is the whole problem, and it has never once been true. But here's what should make you lean in. Franklin didn't write it. He printed it. He polished it. He handed it to a nation. But the sentence was already old when Franklin was a young man copying it down. This phrase is older than the United States. It's older than Philadelphia. So we keep walking back. Half a century before Franklin, an Englishman named Algernon Sidney wrote it down in almost exactly the words we use now. Sidney was a political thinker, a man who argued about liberty and the right to resist a tyrant, and who was executed for those very arguments. In his writing on government, the line appears, "God helps those who help themselves." And notice, he doesn't introduce it. He doesn't say, "as the Greeks used to say," or "there's an old proverb." He just drops it in, the way you drop in any phrase your readers already carry around. By Sidney's day, it was simply in the water, a common saying, the kind of thing you quote without a footnote because everyone already knows it, and nobody remembers learning it. That's exactly how a pagan proverb slips into a Christian century without anyone raising a hand to ask where it's from. So that's 2 steps back, and we still haven't found an author. Just 2 men passing the same coin along, which means we have to ask the harder question. Where does a saying like this actually begin? Where's the bottom? 2,500 years ago, long before Franklin, centuries before the New Testament was even written, we find a storyteller named Aesop. You know Aesop, the tortoise and the hare, the boy who cried wolf. He told a fable called Hercules and the Wagoner. Picture it. A man is driving a heavy cart down a muddy country road. The wheels sink, the oxen strain and stop, and the driver does what a lot of us do when life gets stuck. He gives up and starts praying. He throws himself down in the road and cries out to Hercules, the strongest of the gods, to come and lift the cart for him. And the god does appear, but not to lift anything. Hercules stands over him and says, in so many words, "Get up off the ground. Put your own shoulder to the wheel. Whip the oxen. Do the work in front of you. And then call on me, and I'll help. Pray with your hands moving, not with your hands folded." And the moral printed at the end of that fable 25 centuries ago is this: the gods help those who help themselves. I'll admit, the first time I read the actual fable, I understood why the line survived so long. It's good advice. It really is. If your only problem is laziness, Hercules is right. Most of us have prayed for a thing we weren't willing to lift a finger toward. The fable isn't evil. It's just, and this is the entire point, it isn't scripture. It's a piece of practical Greek wisdom about not being passive, wise, human, and about as far from the message of the cross as you can get. There it is. That's the sentence. That's the source, or very close to it. The line "America files under Holy Bible" was first the punchline of a Greek fable, sitting in the same collection as the tortoise and the hare. And I want you to catch one small word, because it's about to matter enormously. Aesop didn't say God, he said the gods, plural. This isn't the God of Abraham handing down a command. This is the crowded sky of Greek mythology. We haven't just left the Bible behind. We've walked into a completely different religion. So if it's the gods, plural, which god exactly was this saying really pointing to? That answer is the part that stopped me in my tracks. The ancient Greeks had a proverb that ran right alongside Aesop's fable. In their own words it went, Sin Athena kai cheda kine. And here's what it means, almost word for word. Along with Athena, move your hand too. Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom and skill and craft, the patron of weavers and potters and shipwrights, the divine mind behind every clever human hand. Of course, this proverb attached itself to her. She was the goddess you called on when you were making something, building something, fixing something. And the saying was a little prayer to her, with a warning folded inside it. Don't just kneel there asking the goddess to do it all. Pick up your tools. Do your part, and Athena will do hers. Centuries later, the scholar Erasmus would gather it into his great collection of ancient proverbs, proof that educated Europe knew exactly where it came from, even as ordinary people slowly forgot. Sit with that for a second. The verse that millions of believers attribute to the God of the Bible, the line printed in study guides and quoted from pulpits and stitched onto pillows, was, at its root, an instruction about cooperating with a Greek goddess. Not Yahweh, not the God who speaks out of the burning bush. Athena. I want to be fair here, because this is the kind of moment where it's easy to get carried away. I'm not saying everyone who's ever quoted this line was secretly worshiping a goddess. Of course not. Sayings travel. They lose their fingerprints. By the time it reached Franklin, the Athena was long gone, and only the self-help was left. That's honest, and it's important. But it changes everything about trusting the line, doesn't it? Because we didn't just inherit a neutral proverb, we inherited a theology. A specific picture of how heaven works. You start the engine, and the divine kicks in to finish. You earn the first 80%, and grace covers the rest. That picture has a name and an address. It's Athena's. It is not the Bible's. Which brings us, finally, to the question I've been holding back this whole time. We've found who started it. Now I need to show you what the Bible actually says instead, because it's not a small correction. The real scripture doesn't trim this idea. It turns it completely upside down. Open the letter Paul wrote to the church in Rome, chapter 5, verse 6. In the King James it reads, For when we were yet without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. Without strength. Hold on to that phrase, because in Paul's Greek, it's a single vivid word, and English softens it almost into nothing. The word is asthenēs. Asthenēs. It doesn't mean a little tired. It doesn't mean low on motivation. It's the word you'd use for someone who is bedridden, sick to the point of helplessness, a body that cannot get itself up off the floor. It's the picture of a person with nothing left to give, no shoulder to put to the wheel, no hand to move alongside the goddess. Empty. And that, Paul says, is exactly when Christ came. Let me put the two sentences side by side, because this is the whole video in 10 seconds. The pagan proverb says, God meets you when you've done your part. Paul says, Christ came for you when you had no part left to do. One waits for your strength. The other shows up precisely in your weakness. And Paul goes further, and this is the line that finishes it. He doesn't say Christ died for the deserving, or the trying, or the self-starters. He says Christ died for the ungodly. The Greek there is asebēs, the people who weren't even facing God's direction. Not the ones who helped themselves halfway, the ones who hadn't taken a single step. And this isn't one stray verse you can argue away. It's the spine of the whole New Testament. Listen to Paul again, writing to Corinth, when he begs God to take away some private pain, and God refuses, and tells him why. My strength, God says, is made perfect in weakness. Made perfect in weakness, not in your hustle, not in your shoulder against the wheel. The Greek there is the cousin of our word, asthenēs, that same root of having no strength left. God is saying, the empty place is exactly where his power shows up clearest. Athena needs your hand on the tool. The God of the Bible works best in the hand that has nothing to hold. Or take the cleanest statement of it, in Paul's letter to Ephesus. By grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Read that slowly. Not of yourselves, not of works. The single thing the Bible most insists you cannot do is help yourself into grace. The whole point is that it's a gift, and the moment you earn a gift, it stops being one. So here's your reframe, the one I'd write on the wall if I could. Athena helps those who help themselves. God helps those who can't. That's not a motivational poster. That's the opposite of one. And it's the actual message of the book everyone thought the poster came from. I told you at the start I used to quote this line to sound like a grown-up in my faith. Here's what I missed for all those years. By saying God helps those who help themselves, I was quietly telling myself, and anyone listening, that grace is a reward, that you qualify for it, that you'd better bring something to the table. And the Greek of Romans 5 just takes that table and turns it over. There's nothing to bring. That's the entire point. That's why it's called good news instead of good advice. Now, let me give the other side its fair hearing, because a thoughtful person is already pushing back, and they should. Wait, you might say, doesn't the Bible praise hard work? Doesn't Proverbs send us to watch the ant? Doesn't James say faith without works is dead? Yes, all of that is true, and I won't pretend it isn't. Scripture has zero patience for laziness. But notice the order. In the Bible, the work never buys the grace. The work flows out of it. You don't help yourself so that God will love you. You're loved while you're still helpless, asthenēs, flat on the floor. And the strength to get up comes after, as a gift, not a wage. The ant works. But the ant was never trying to earn its maker. Effort is the fruit of grace, never the price of it. That's the difference between the gospel and a goddess. And if you've been tired, really tired, I think this is the part that's for you. So many of us are quietly exhausted by a faith we think we have to power ourselves. Like we have to crawl to 80% on our own before heaven will bother with the rest. Like we're checking our spiritual bank balance at midnight, terrified we haven't done enough. I think of the man who lost the job and can't pray anymore because he feels he hasn't earned the right to ask. I think of the woman caring for a dying parent, running on empty, sure that her exhaustion is a kind of failure, that if she just had more faith, she'd have more strength. Both of them have been handed the goddess's gospel without knowing it. Both of them are waiting to be strong enough to deserve help. And both of them are reading the one verse that says, no, the help came while you were still down. If that's you, and over the years it's been a lot of us, the strong ones most of all, hear the real verse. You were never asked to help yourself first. Grace meets you at zero. It always has. So let me ask you something, and I read every reply to these. Where in your life have you been trying to help yourself toward God, trying to earn something that was already a gift? You don't have to write much. One line, just naming it out loud, here, can be the moment it loosens its grip, and you won't be the only one who needs to read it. 2,500 years, a Greek fable, a goddess, an English political writer, a Philadelphia printer, and somewhere along that road, a prayer to Athena quietly put on the clothes of Scripture and walked into our churches. It's an easy mistake to make. The lie feels holy. It feels responsible and strong and grown up. But the God of the Bible never asked you to save yourself first and call it faith. He came for the helpless while they were still helpless. That's not a weaker message. Once you've actually heard it, it's the strongest thing there is. And maybe that's the quiet test this whole study leaves you with. The next time a line lands in your lap, wearing the clothes of Scripture, comforting, confident, exactly what you wanted to hear, don't just nod. Go look for the chapter and verse. Sometimes you'll find it, and it'll mean more than ever. And sometimes you'll find nothing there at all. Just an old road, a stuck wagon, and a goddess who was never God. If this study helped you see one familiar line with new eyes, the best thing you can do is share it with someone who still thinks it's verse. That's genuinely how this channel survives. You're the reason it reaches anyone at all. Thank you for that. Because here's the unsettling part. This isn't the only one. There's at least one more saying nearly everyone in the room believes is in the Bible. And it's hiding in plain sight, in some of the most famous words ever spoken. That's where we go next.